It sits near record highs following 3 straight weeks of gains. And we are back with Man Group Chief Market Strategist, Christina Hooper. So Christina, at the moment, one enthusiasm over Anthropic and their revenues, but the other development has been more of these tech giants tapping the bond market. This morning, it's Alphabet going to Australian markets and issuing bonds there. We're speaking this with our credit analyst, Robert Schiffman, earlier, but how much are you seeing a crowding out of larger markets and larger debt markets? It's not just inflation, perhaps, that's raising treasury yields. Is it also a crowding out from the hyperscalers issuing debt?
Oh, absolutely. I think the more debt issuance you have, and presumably the same level of supply in terms of willing buyers, that does create a crowding out. That does drive up yields. And so I think this is very much a concern in terms of longer term keeping yields elevated on the long end, but also I think it represents greater risks for investors when it comes to AI-related names, because this is looking increasingly like the telecom boom, the fiber optic network build out of the late 90s, early 2000s. It used to be that people could draw the conclusion that this is so different than last time, right? Because they're not taking on debt this time. They're basically taking some of free cash flow and investing it. But now that's not the case. They're taking on debt. The stakes are higher, and essentially the hurdle rate is a lot higher.
So someone, or the bulls might argue, as Robert Schiffman did, that these are healthy companies. The earnings look really strong. Again, Anthropic reporting huge numbers before they head into their IPO. So isn't the debt less worrying then if what's backing them is still really strong corporate balance sheets?
That is true, but keep in mind that we're now seeing a real psychological shift on the part of investors, where they used to reward the hyperscalers for putting more money into this build-out. Now they're starting to punish them, especially those that seem to be taking on more debt than investors are comfortable with. So I do think it's a double-edged sword. It is certainly not the late 90s, early 2000s, but in some ways it is rhyming.
Do you think, though, that equity bulls are ignoring that, are ignoring higher yields, especially on the long end? Are the two markets sending different signals that at some point need to sync up?
They're definitely sending different signals, and I think at some point they will sync up. And the catalyst could very well be if yields get high enough. I think we're not far away from seeing the 10-year at 5%. I think that will be critically important in terms of driving downward pressure on long duration equities, especially tech names. I think it's inevitable that this happens and that there is that merging of views on the bond market and the equity market.
So given that, what do you do with tech holdings? If it's a big theme and AI is here to stay and it's changing the way that we live, can you ride that market, or do you need to be more hesitant given what bond yields are doing and that it's going to be hurting long duration assets like tech?
Well, I think you certainly want to participate, but you want to be more discerning. So the time calls for active management. And I think that makes sense. Anytime we see some great industrial revolution, what we see is an early period in which rising tide floats all boats. And at some point, discernment matters and differentiation among names matters. And I think we've gotten to that point.
But what are the names that you can go into at the moment? If so many of them are taking on debt, I realize that Mag 7 doesn't trade like a monolith anymore. Apple is different than Alphabet is. But a common thread, putting Apple aside, for these ones involved in AI has been the massive amounts of spending they are doing. So where do you find the bright spots that you're less worried about, especially if you want to continue this theme?
Well, I think you want to be far more cautious around the hyperscalers. That's not to say avoid them, but be far more careful around them, because those are the ones that are taking on a lot of the debt. I think it's looking for the beneficiaries of this build out, and also the ones that are helping solve problems that could be obstacles to the build out. So I think in terms of all the movements, the community movements pushing back on data center building, with even occurring in Texas, right? And that says to me,
hello, my name is Dr. Paul Cottrell. We are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, and my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for joining. Please share the links and ask your social media to follow me. All these videos are for free, so please be a member to my Patreon channel to help support the work that I do. And for the ones that have been members to my Patreon channel, thank you very much for helping support. I also want to go over a few topics today. Definitely energy, want to talk about Anthropic, inflation, and anything else that's breaking in the news. In terms of the big news, that's Anthropic. Anthropic has been going around trying to do the roadshow to get some interest in their IPO. They're looking for $1 trillion to $2 trillion IPO. There's no way that company's worth $2 trillion. There's no way that company's worth $1 trillion. Before Mythos came out, it was about evaluated at 380 billion, which is still too high. They, according to some of the paperwork that's been passed out to some of these pre-IPO investors, they're bringing in revenues of approximately $11.5 billion, and they're spending about $40 billion. This is the same ratio that we were seeing with OpenAI, 16 billion and 37 billion. 16 billion coming in and 37 billion going out. So it's roughly about the same. Now, Anthropic saying, well, our revenues grew 14 times and all this stuff. Well, but can you be profitable? That's the big question. So this has the elements of a bubble. Now, it doesn't mean that they'll go bankrupt, but the way things are presented at the moment, the business model for OpenAI and Anthropic, they do not make sense. It's not sustainable. So something else has to happen here. There's a little bit of an Enron feel to this because of the special purpose vehicles. There's in circular financing, the off-balance sheet risk reduction sounds sort of like Lehman and what the banks were doing when they were packaging mortgages and getting it off their balance sheet and just shoving the risk to someone else. So there's a little bit of a Lehman kind of feel to it. There's the tech bubble feel, and then the railroads, the building out of the railroads. So this is different, and this will become a business case over at the Harvard Business School. Trust me, they're going to say this is what happened, but everything has to collapse first. So Anthropic is looking for a high valuation for their IPO, which is not sustainable. And I think the canary in the coal mine was the 1.4 trillion or 1.5 trillion or whatever it was IPO valuation for SpaceX. Now, SpaceX is trading at 143 at the moment. Now, the S&P 500 is at about 7,776. I have a year-end target of 7,800. It might hit 8,000, but I'm a little concerned because of the AI bubble, so pay attention to that. If you want to long the semiconductor industry, take a look at the ETF. It's a leveraged ETF. It's called USD. If you want to short the semiconductor industry, it's called SSG, the ETF. Now, the equity market is kind of trending a little bit down right now. It's down about 8 points. Not too bad. To long the S&P 500, you can use SPY, but if you want to do leverage, take a look at SSO, and if you want to short the S&P 500 leverage, take a look at SDS. So SDS is up a little bit today, and SSO is down a little bit. Now, oil is trading at 82.72. It's going to be trading in a range between 79.62 and approximately $88. It's going to be a little bit closer to about the 83, 84 mark during this trading range. I do not suspect that we are going to hear anything positive coming out of the Middle East. I'd be shocked but if we do, it'll break the 79.62 level and start trading between the 68 to 79 range. Natural gas is trading at 2.703. I have a short and a long position. I have a hedge position for natural gas, not equally weighted. I'm a little bit heavier on the short. The trading range for this time of the year the fair value is probably around 2.6, maybe 2.55, maybe 2.575. But this summer it's hotter, so more people are using air conditioners. There's a weather pattern that's hitting the East Coast and the Midwest where there's a lot of rain. So that's affecting, some of the energy consumption with natural gas. But right now, last night it was trending down, and now it's starting to mean revert back. So the trading range for this could be anywhere from 2.75 to about 2.65. Now, as it's trading at around close to 2.6, that's near the bottom compared to other trading ranges, the bottom of other trading ranges last year and even maybe earlier this year. I'd have to look at the chart, but definitely last year. So it's having a hard time breaking through that 2.6 range. But I do think that the fair value should be around 2.55. But right now it's trending up. So this is part of the reason why I have this hedge strategy. It's not a equally weighted hedge strategy. And Euro is trading at 115.9, and the Japanese yen is trading at 159.32. So the yen is starting to weaken again. So the BOJ is going to intervene. The BOJ is signaling that they're going to raise rates. Another big element to the market is the yield curve is changing. It's going up. And that's not good for people that are borrowing. So the 10-year yield, is at 4.7. It should be at 4, maybe 3.9. Before the war, it was at 3.9. So 4.7 is the 10-year, and the 30-year is at 5.28. It's not out of the realm of possibility of seeing a 5 handle for the 10-year and a 5.75, closer maybe to even just below 6 for the 30-year. So that's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem for many people. All right, with that, before we go to Bloomberg, I want to just plug a couple products here. Please go to my store and get the magnesium and zinc. Magnesium and zinc will help to improve your brain function and help with your immune system. Super important. Now, a great neurostack to help with brain function is Clarity Factor. It gets rid of that brain fog. It allows you to concentrate on tasks. Take it every day, and over time, you're going to have those dendritic connections that allows you to have better memory and think faster. It's a great neurostack, so get the Clarity Factor. And digestive enzyme complex. If you're 40 years of age or older, reduce the stress on your pancreas by taking the digestive enzyme complex while you eat, and that will help to break up the carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. And you'll be able to absorb those nutrients with less stress. This also has bromelain, and bromelain helps to break up clots. So that's also going to help with cardiovascular. And if you're an athlete, younger or older, you'll also benefit from digestive enzyme complex. Take it for your pre and post workout fueling. So please go to my store and get the digestive enzyme complex, the Clarity Factor, and the magnesium and zinc. Use discount 5 and save some money. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video.
previously, the 47 billion ARR. So from that perspective, it's an affirmation that this company has 10x its revenue over the past 1 year, and it's huge in the context of this AI investment that we are witnessing. I mean, every company right now is super aggressive in building data center capacity, primarily because of Anthropic's numbers. They see that 10x rapid revenue, and they want to make sure they have the capacity to either rent it out if you're a neo cloud player, or if you're a hyperscaler. Without the frontier model, you want to be in the game, and that's what we saw with the 2Q print. Every company did see an acceleration in cloud revenue. So I feel that aggressiveness in CapEx growth for second half in 2027 is because of what we see from Anthropic.
Does that also accelerate Meta, for example, where there was this unclear message about exactly what they want to become, to say, hey, maybe you should be renting more compute because the large LLMs need that, and see really successful revenue versus kind of trying to develop your own in-house LLM?
Yeah, and more so given what SpaceX has been able to do in terms of the Anthropic deal and the Google deal, and now they're talking about 8 gigawatts of new addition in data center capacity by 2027. So from that perspective, SpaceX has become a new hyperscaler in addition to the 4 that we talk about all the time. And they have the backing of NVIDIA. NVIDIA right now is making sure that they kind of prop up their ecosystem, where you have Microsoft and Meta, but now they are also bringing in SpaceX. And Google, on the other hand, obviously is doing its own equity issuance and bond issuance to make sure it can ramp up TPUs. But there is no doubt that everyone is going after data center capacity primarily for that reason.
One of the other developments is token pricing has plummeted as tracked by Silicon Data. I mean, it was trading at a high not that long ago in late May, early June, and now it's back at levels that we saw in 2025. How much of this pricing ecosystem, and that's the chart we're looking at now, puts pressure on the large language models because people are pivoting maybe more towards open sourcing in order to get these token costs down? Does it put economic pressure on the giants that have closed source models?
Yeah, I mean, look, Anthropic's revenue has 10x, primarily because of the way token pricing trended so far. But if it's coming down and open source adoption takes off, it's going to put pressure on the likes of Anthropic, which is a proprietary closed source model. Same thing with OpenAI. So it'll be interesting to see if the growth rate slows for these frontier models because of the token pricing coming down. We haven't seen so far, because people have a preference for frontier intelligence and they're willing to pay up, even though the aggregate token pricing seems to be coming down.
It's pretty remarkable to look at these two private companies, OpenAI and Anthropic, and hearing nuggets of news from them bullies the overall public markets. Again, even though they're not listed, what do you expect this world to be like when they are public and we're going to be getting quarterly updates from them?
I mean, they will certainly have more pressure, to perform every quarter the way other public companies have in terms of beating consensus numbers. But there's no doubt right now we are witnessing a secular trend, and it's driven by these two private companies. So I think they are prepping for an IPO, and a lot of these numbers come in here and there just because they're preparing for that roadshow, which everyone I think is looking forward to.
Hey, Mandeep, thank you for joining. Great to see you. Mandeep Singh from Bloomberg Intelligence. Coming up, Stripe makes a $7 billion acquisition as it looks to gain footing in the AI sector.
So Sandeep, it was saying, well, the hyperscalers have to ramp up because Anthropic is increasing their revenues. Yet Anthropic, every time they increase their revenues, they're spending more money. So actually, they're more in the hole. But let's put that aside for a second. How broad is the customer base for the hypers, for these server farms? Who are their customers? OpenAI and Anthropic, and very little of anything else. So the two biggest customers don't make money. They bring in money, but don't make money. That's like making a car, and instead of collecting revenue, you're just stapling a $50 bill to the grill and sending it to the customer. It's very similar. So there's not a business model for this. And I'm not the only one saying this. There's a lot of people talking about this. So I think there's too much hype. Now, that doesn't mean that the bubble can't just keep on getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, which I think it will. But Q1, maybe it bursts. Maybe Q4 of this year it bursts. Maybe Q2, but it has to burst. So that's the reason why maybe playing USD long it for a little while. And then once we start hearing that there are problems with the IPO, or maybe when the bubble bursts, it'll be after the IPO. And then you start shorting the semiconductors, like using SSG. Now, what's NVIDIA doing? Now, I'm most likely NVIDIA is up today, but let's just take a look. What's NVIDIA doing today? NVIDIA is trading at the moment at $226 per share. And it's trending down similar to the overall broad market of the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is trading at 7,779. So NVIDIA's at 22.6. But it wasn't that long ago that NVIDIA was trading at 190 in July. So right now there's a little bit of a rush of investment in tech, in semiconductors, in AI, that whole AI trade, but that's gonna probably run its course 3 months, maybe 6 months, maybe, and then all of a sudden we start hearing it collapsing again and retest the lows of that sell-off that happened in July. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver lozenges. They're perfect for cleaning the house. Take them just in case that you're going to be around dust or you're working in the yard. It's perfect for allergies and the cold season. You can get it in orange splash and Manuka honey. They're made from structural nano silver, so they will neutralize. So make sure you have a few bags for your household for that allergy season, the cold season, and just cleaning around the house. They're very effective. And olive leaf extract. Olive leaf extract is dual purpose. It'll help to bring down inflammation and help to control your lipid profile. Help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. When that happens, you have less concentration of oxidized LDL, and you're going to be able to have less plaque formation. That's going to be positive for your cardiovascular health. And this helps with your immune system by bringing down that inflammation. So please go to my store and get the olive leaf extract. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off.
Are becoming so sought after because they are sort of the toll booth that is determining where they can route the various orders coming in so that their customer is not paying as much as they used to.
Thank you for bringing the Gen Zs into this conversation, Sri. No longer token maxing is what thrift maxing. I mean, we have seen, we're just talking about this with Mandeep, we've seen token prices fall off of a cliff. They were just trading at all-time highs in the spring, and it speaks to what you're saying. These companies are looking for cheaper options. Sure, looking at this chart, yes, I know we just heard from Anthropic and the 4 times revenue. Is that bad for the IPOs that are going to come to this market? The fact that the environment is changing, that open routers of the world are getting these types of funding and these giants are about to IPO into this environment?
You get these scary sounding headlines and you see some of these scary numbers, but then you look at the numbers that OpenAI is printing, the numbers that Anthropic is printing, and that revenue growth does not seem to be slowing down. So what I'm saying is it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. Just because the costs are coming down does not mean the overall revenue pool will have to shrink. Airline costs were not cheaper 40, 50 years back. The airline industry is much bigger than what it was back then. So there's one proof point. I'm not saying that's necessarily how it has to play out, but just because token prices are coming down does not mean that has to spell doom for OpenAI and Anthropic and other advanced models.
Yeah, it's like the Jevons paradox of token pricing. Shri, thank you so much for joining us. By the way, Shri has an excellent big takeout. I suggest everyone go out and read it, and I big take is where you want to head for that. Coming up in the next hour, Logan Capital's Sarah Henry talks about consumer ahead of major retail earnings. Surf Robotics CEO on their latest expansion in DC and Miami. And Cycle CEO Megan O'Connor talks about the critical mineral supply chain after meeting with the president just on Friday. Again, 30 minutes into a trading day, and we're looking at a stock market that is little changed to slightly lower as tech.
All right, we're gonna play a clip by Trey Yingst about the Middle East.
Whoa.
What's that?
I just built a budgeting app for Phase 44.
Guys, you just built an app.
Impossible. Getting that kid.
So President Trump issued a new warning this morning telling Fox that Iran should wave the white flag.
The president's comments come as the U.S. 60-day ceasefire agreement with Iran is set to expire today.
Trey Yates spoke with President Trump earlier and joined us now from Tel Aviv. Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Today, the 60-day memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran expires. And Fox News spoke with the president early this morning to get his thinking on what comes next. The president told Fox News that Iran should put up the white flag of surrender. And he went on to say, I have no time schedule. I'm not in a hurry. The president talking broadly about the back channel negotiations that are taking place and confirming to Fox that there is a back channel directly between Washington and top IRGC officials in Tehran. The first public confirmation of such a channel. And this is critical because it comes as these conversations go back and forth. The president says they're good poker players, but they're dying, and that the midterms have nothing to do with my thinking. This is all moving very quickly in the region because there is a U.S. military posture that remains, and there are a lot of different players involved and talks that are taking place as we speak right now between Iran and Oman about control of the Strait of Hormuz. And the president says if Oman gets in the way, we'll bomb the S out of them. Because at the end of the day, the president wants two clear things here. He wants control of the Strait of Hormuz. There's an ongoing U.S. naval blockade that is costing the Iranian regime hundreds of millions of dollars each day. And if ultimately this leads to future negotiations, that is when Iran's nuclear program is expected to be discussed. Guys?
Well, first off, Trey, there's some really intriguing things going on with Jared Kushner in the region. He's actually meeting with Hamas leaders, which is relatively unprecedented, about disarming. And he's meeting with them outside Gaza, but about disarming in Gaza. And there's an international force poised to come in that includes, at least 8,000 Indonesians. But at the same time, Prime Minister Netanyahu is not committed to pulling out, understandably, until he's convinced that Hamas is disarmed. So what do you think could move this process forward, being that it seems so close?
Absolutely. There is a parallel diplomatic track that is taking place right now, and that's the Trump administration trying to move forward the Gaza ceasefire that is supposed to see Hamas lay down their arms. But it's a very complicated process because it comes after years of war between Israel and Hamas, after Hamas launched a terrorist attack into southern Israel on October 7th of 2023. Now, President Trump spoke about this, saying the Israelis should not be striking Gaza right now, and that the United States has their own relationship with Hamas. He adds they are giving up their guns. And so if this takes place, it will be a major step in these negotiations to disarm Hamas and to usher in this new technocratic government. Now, as we speak, One of the top negotiators for the United States, Jared Kushner, is meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And I asked the president about the upcoming Israeli elections in October. He told Fox News, "I think it's most appropriate for me to stay out of Israeli elections, but I may endorse somebody." Guys?
So Trey, there's been a lot of conversation, and I gotta be honest, conversation that I'm not even comfortable having on the stockpiles as it relates to this war and the larger impact about other enemies. What did the president say about that? Is there concern right now?
So I asked the president about these stockpiles, and President Trump told Fox News, "What we've used is peanuts." He says the United States has a lot of mid-level weapons. He blamed former President Biden for shipping air defense systems to Ukraine at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022. But broadly speaking, the president did not express concern about the current munition stockpile across the region. And remember, the backdrop here is quite important. There are around 50,000 U.S. forces stationed in the Middle East right now, and it gives the president a variety of military options if he chooses to use them in the future. He noted that the Iranians are still continuing attacks in the Strait of Hormuz, but pointed out that the U.S. naval blockade remains in effect. He called it a wall of steel, and also noted that as this wall of steel is in place, the United States is helping to escort oil out of the Persian Gulf. And so there is still this export of oil taking place, not from Iran, but from regional Gulf allies that are working behind the scenes with the United States, not just on that defensive posture, but also ensuring that the global energy market remains stable.
So, Trey, the president has said the soldiers and the police are not getting paid in Iran. The current sanctions are costing Iran $435 million a day, it's being estimated. Ted, explain what's happening to the people in Iran, and are they able to fight back against this? Because it reminds me of what happened. If they did fight back, it reminds me of what happened in January when people were getting killed for protesting. So how are the people surviving? And are they speaking out and saying that this is not fair, we need to get paid?
It's a great question, and I've been talking with regional intelligence sources to get a better understanding of what these economic sanctions and the U.S. naval blockade are actually doing to Iran. We know that the blockade is costing the regime hundreds of millions of dollars each day because the Iranians are not able to export crude oil from these critical ports along the Persian Gulf and into the Strait of Hormuz. But it's the economic sanctions that are expected to increase, according to U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. And you have to think about sanctions. You look at this like an onion, and at the center of the onion, you have the U.S. naval blockade. And this is targeting Iran's main moneymaker, and that is their oil export apparatus. But then you have these secondary sanctions, and reports indicate they're going to start targeting even some of these Chinese companies that are buying Iranian oil. And so this is focusing mainly on the Iranian regime and officials in Tehran that use this money not only to produce missiles and drones, but also to pay top IRGC officials and even the field commanders that are ordering the missile strikes when they do take place against U.S. forces or allies across the region. And so this is a game of cat and mouse, but it's also a game of patience. And the president indicated to Fox News earlier today that he has no timetable. And this really flips the Iranian equation on its head because the Iranians thought they could wait this out. They thought the midterms would pressure President Trump to make a decision and pull U.S. forces out of the region. But the president has indicated to Fox News he plans to keep the U.S. naval blockade in place. And this is increasing the economic pressure on the Iranian regime. Inflation is rising. The process of goods and actually exporting goods is decreasing. And the focus now is on the regime officials in Tehran and ensuring that they have fewer dollars to put toward their military and these efforts to try to threaten U.S. forces across the region.
Right. Thanks so much, Trey. Appreciate it. Great breakdown. What I think is going to happen is if we do not go back to military strikes, and who knows, who might, around October, they're very familiar with our November elections, they'll start doing something more aggressive, more aggressive, more aggressive. Then when we answer, price of oil and gas go up. And it's going to hurt Republicans come the primaries. Because what he wants to do is diminish President, what they want to do is diminish President Trump's power. Because he's the only one to ever confront them militarily. There's been sanctions and there's been agreements and there's been harsh words, but he's the only one to take them on directly after 47 years. And they want to do anything they can to make sure he's not president, or if he is president, make sure he does not have as much power. So that's what I worry about. They'll be able to dictate our elections unless we take them down before they.
That's why we have to make it a national security issue. We cannot, it's not being elitist. It's not saying that it doesn't matter. Of course, gas prices matter. It impacts not just people on the day-to-day basis, but everything is controlled by oil and gas. But when you tell the American people this is a national security, what could happen if we don't get it up? No one would have ever suggested when they attacked 9/11, our Twin Towers, and the gas prices, whatever, we were in combat operations, that should impact our response to that.
And don't forget, these are people that want to wipe America off the face of the map. They want to wipe Israel off the face of the map. They say death to America. So if they got a nuclear weapon, we won't even have cars to put gas in, right? I mean, it's more important for them not to have a nuclear weapon because they do want to kill us. They hate us. And don't forget that.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
In-person event during a
Well, to the Middle East, where tensions remain high as the United States 60-day ceasefire agreement with Iran is set to expire today.
Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yeats just spoke with President Trump and joins us now from Tel Aviv. Trey.
Yeah, hey guys.
They did two different clips on that. Let's see here. All right, let's listen to this. This is CNBC about oil.
Well, it goes back to something that every president has learned since Jimmy Carter made a fatal mistake in 1977. He went on TV and he's wearing this sweater and you can see the thermostat in the back, and he made the comment to the American public that there is an energy shortage. And so what do you think happened? Commodity prices exploded the next day. Moral of the story is never admit to the scarcity. And from that point forward, starting with George Bush Sr., they would always release the SPR if there was any type of disruption globally, and hope by talking down the market, releasing reserves, they could bridge the gap until the shortage resolved itself and prices remain low. And it has worked. And by the way, everybody wants to accuse the Trump administration of acting differently. It acted no different than Biden, no different than Bush Jr., Bush Sr. All of them do the exact same thing. They create that illusion of abundance. What makes this one different is the magnitude and the length of the disruption. And I want to emphasize in the product markets, that illusion of abundance is likely well behind us at this point in time. But that's really the idea here. The question is, how long can they keep that illusion going? The SPR is getting at critically low levels, and it does not have an end in sight, as you just pointed out. This morning, there's no continuation of the MoU. There's a lot of uncertainty when the oil's going to flow again.
Jeff, but I've listened to really smart people like yourselves and Fatih Birol and others, and have been real concerned about the underlying products going up, which you just pointed out. The products have got that illusion behind them. But the oil price that I'm showing on the screen as we speak is still really tame, Jeff, compared to what you and I and others have seen historically. Are you saying that actually that we are now on the cusp of that illusion, that bubble being burst, and actually people are going to realize that the price of the underlying commodity has to go up?
Yeah, but I want to emphasize, nobody consumes oil but refineries. To everybody else on the planet Earth, investors alike, and everybody out there, that what matters are the product prices. It just happens that historically, that spread between product prices and crude oil was relatively stable. So every macro model, every investor, all the consumers are failing to realize, look at your screen. Diesel this morning on European exchange is $170 a barrel. You repeat that, $170 a barrel. Brent is what, 87, 88, somewhere around there. So it's nearly half the price of the products. So those relationships, those econometric models, everybody that's been making that assumption that the spread between oil and products is a relatively stable, constant relationship, have missed out. Now, so I think your bigger question is what has caused that? But I want to emphasize before I answer that, does it matter? I want to emphasize nobody on the planet Earth consumes crude oil. They consume diesel, gasoline, and the products. So from a macro perspective, from an investor perspective, you really need to be looking at the products. So what's caused it? I think one of the key issues really is that when they did the MoU late June and early July, it created a surge in oil supplies that were trapped inside the Straits of Hormuz, to the tune of 100 to 120 million barrels. The other factor that you had was Chinese cut the runs. If they cut the runs, they're making products tighter and they're making oil softer. But again, everybody goes, oh, China solved this problem. No, they didn't. They just shifted the products and kept the oil price more at bay. And I think the problem is that everybody's looking at this. But I want to emphasize, this is all temporary. You're going to run the course on that surging crude. You're going to have refineries around the world kick up in places like China because they're going to chase those margins. Because those margins are unprecedented and it provides great economic value to refineries. They're not going to sit there and just look at them. They're going to go after those types of profits. So I would view this as being a temporary dislocation in the crude price. But I want to emphasize, bear right there, does it matter? Only to a refinery or an investor in crude oil. But for the rest of the people, I think focus on those product prices.
And picking up on that point, Jeff, I'm going to try and just join the dots here between different movements that we're seeing. The point you make about diesel, yes, a gallon of gas is up about 30% compared to last year. A gallon of diesel is up 46% compared with last year. Diesel is the one that's used industrially for shipping, for trucking in industry. And so potentially the inflationary effects of the diesel price spike are going to be far more serious. I'm interested to get your thoughts on that. And has that contributed to the gold rally we've seen, where investors start to worry about the inflationary effects on, say, their cash holdings?
Well, I went on.
Having a custom app can give you a serious edge over the competition. And with GoDaddy Aero AI Builder, you can have one ready to go before the launch.
Well, I went on. Before I talk about gold, let's just talk about the inflationary impact of this. Part of the reason why gold rallied was the weak labor data in the United States, concerns around a slowdown in the U.S. or potentially recession, plus the benign inflation data. But benign inflation data, it's usually surveyed around the 13th to 15th of each month. That's not the August report. That was a July report. Remember I said that big surge of supply that came out late June, early July. That was when the market tanked, and that's when they did that measurement of the CPI. So that's part of what was driving the gold price lower. That's going to prove to be transitory. But I want to emphasize what I would argue why I was short gold going back, I think last time I was on your program, which was about 2 months ago, and why I want to be long gold now, is if we go back to when the situation in the Straits began. You saw the inability of the Middle East countries to be able to export oil, raise cash from that. So if you can't raise cash from that, what are you going to raise cash from? Selling your gold. And so you sell what you can, not what you want to. And as a result, that combined with emerging markets, you had the opposite problem. They had to raise cash to buy oil, defense, and other types of activities on affordability. They had to sell the gold to raise that. Both of those dynamics are transient. They're likely behind us. So what is the longer term outlook for gold? There is always going to be a constant bid from central banks, particularly the emerging markets, for gold right now to diversify their reserves. That has not stopped. It's going to continue. Again, it's like to say, as everybody goes, oh, I want to be long the dollar has got a great outlook relative to the pound sterling. Yeah, I'm going to give that to you. Yeah. Fiat currencies do not have a good outlook relative to gold in hard assets. And that story, I think, is going to continue. So I got a lot of upside here from gold from right now. And the big question is what does Warsh do in September? I think the consensus view is be flat. So
yeah, I'm sure. But just put the counterpoint with that argument on gold. If there are central banks worried about the weakness of their currencies and relative to the dollar, of course, oil priced in dollars, they're worried about the inflationary effects on their economies. If they wanted to prop up their strength of their currencies, they would presumably sell some of their gold holdings, wouldn't they? Which would put some downward pressure on the price.
Yep, and that's what was the core behind why I wanted to be bearish on gold earlier. But when we think about, there's that context, but you also want to diversify away from dollars, away from euros, away from pound sterling, away from yen, away from everything out there. If you're one of these other emerging markets in some place like China, you have sanction risk in places like Russia, Iran, and all over the rest of the world. You want to get away from dollars as fast as you can, or fiat currencies, because it poses a risk to you that gold will not pose. And I want to emphasize, the crypto doesn't have that same benefit as gold, because you leave a footprint to get into currency or into cryptocurrency, and then you got to get out. The fact of the matter is you can move gold around the world and nobody will ever know you did it. And as a result, if you're looking at a way to protect yourself from any type of sanction risk or somebody messing with your reserves, gold is your safest bet.
Life moves fast. With Citizens, you and your business.
All right, we're going to play another CNBC clip talking about year-end projection of the broad market. Before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. These probiotics will help to improve your gut biome, bring down inflammation, boost up your immune system at the gut level, improve your brain function, and help with metabolism. You can get it in veggie cap version and in the powdered version. Good health starts at the gut. So please go to my store and get either version of the probiotics. If you're 40 years of age or older, get the vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex will rev up your metabolism, your cellular metabolism. It's going to help protect your neurons using B12. And the first 4 B vitamins are really important for boosting up your energy levels. They're tied to the electron transport chain within your mitochondria to create ATP. And that's the major energy source. So if you're 40 years of age or older, make sure you supplement with the vitamin B complex. And Goodnight Formula. Goodnight Formula has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower that allows you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep. So you're consolidating memory, detoxifying your central nervous system, and you'll be well rested. With good sleep, you're slowing down the aging process. With regular good sleep, you are improving your brain function. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I offer.
Stock name, Stephanie Link, Hightower Chief Investment Strategist and a CNBC contributor. Good morning to you. We've been talking about some of the geopolitical issues this morning, some of the things coming out of the administration as well from over the weekend. And then we've also been talking about some of the earnings we're going to hear later this week. How are you positioning yourself in this particular moment?
Yeah, and it's great to be here, Andrew. I think that even though we took a breather last week in the markets, the economy is still chugging along. The Atlanta Fed tracker for the quarter is running at 5.8% for GDP. I don't think we're growing that fast, Andrew, but I do think directionally we're accelerating from last quarter. And it is because of AI and the food chain. We heard from Cisco and Applied Materials and CoreWeave and Supermicro last week. So that's still working. And the consumer is still actually consuming. And I think you're going to get some really good reports, minus the housing cycle and stocks. But I think you're going to see very good numbers from Walmart and from Target, as you guys were just talking about. But when I listen to what the banks have said, they are talking about a very strong consumer, and that even the low end is starting to do a little bit better. They're lending at about 8 to 10% growth. That's very healthy. We have ISM services that are up 20 consecutive months in a row. Retail sales, if you average the last 2 months, because we did have to pull in from Prime Day to Amazon, you're running like 5 to 6%. So I feel good. Earnings are really growing rapidly. I don't think we're going to see 50% growth forever, but we are seeing a lot of momentum. I am encouraged with not only revenues growing double digits, but also gross margins expanding. And oh, by the way, we're on pace to do $4 trillion in M&A this year, which would be a new record.
So,
44.
It's funny, we
sentence.
constantly talk about all these big geopolitical headlines. This morning, North Korea being one of them. We talk about wealth taxes in California. We talk about what's happening in the Middle East with Iran. and oil prices, and yet things continue apace. Is there an argument to say that things are so strong that we just should look away from the other stuff?
Well, I think the fundamentals are really strong. And I think not only are earnings good, but they're very broad-based. 10 out of 11 sectors saw growth this past quarter. 7 out of 11 saw double-digit growth. So I don't think you want to fight the economic momentum. And I know, there are a lot of things to worry about in terms of all the things that you mentioned. It's never perfect. And I worry when I don't worry, because that means we're all complacent. But the underlying fundamentals are so strong. I think you want to continue to be fully invested. I think you want to be diversified. I love that we're broadening out and not just seeing it in technology. And I think we grind higher into the end of the year, because I think earnings may not grow at 50%, but they're still going to grow. I think 20.
What do you think on the tech side? We were talking in the last hour about Berkshire Hathaway's investment in Alphabet. We're going to have Greg Brockman, who's one of the founders of OpenAI, on the broadcast at about 8:30 this morning. Obviously, we got into the whole, I don't know if you were watching a debate or interesting conversation about what's going on in the bond market as it relates to some of the financing for some of these data centers. But if you already owned, and this is a big question for a lot of people who have owned the Magnificent Seven, do you stay in them?
Yeah. I like some of the Magnificent Seven. I think Amazon is the best position, because I think they can win in very, very many ways. Obviously, AWS, and seeing an acceleration to 38% growth from 27% growth the quarter before. That's really good. I think retail sales are running, the businesses are running about 9% comps. Margins are expanding. So I like Amazon. I do like some of the tech set, like some of the newer Mag Centers, if you want to call Micron in there. I've recently bought that down 20% from its highs, with $100 billion of bookings between now and the end of the year. I recently bought NVIDIA for the first time. I've been a big fan of Broadcom, but NVIDIA is the cheapest it's been since 2019, and they're growing like gangbusters, like 85% revenue growth. Margins are 75%. They're going to double free cash flow. And I also bought SpaceX, and I have been buying SpaceX. I bought it during the IPO, and it's pulled back about 30%. They had a great quarter. And I think given the CapEx numbers are going higher, but the company talked about seeing monetization within a year. So I'm all right with them spending 65% growth in CapEx. So I think there's plenty to do in technology, but I also like other areas as well. Financials, industrials, we've talked about a lot of the food chain names in AI as well.
Clamad is a unique brand with human touch.
Success is to make people around me happy.
The more we can use technology to lift weight out of their hands, the better we are compared to the competition.
All right, we're going to switch over to MS Now. Stephanie Rule is going to be talking about the MoU. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. C60, you can get in a 2-ounce, a 4-ounce, or an 8-ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce to get the higher ounce configuration, so you can save some money. Make sure you use discount 5 also, so you save additional. Now, C60, you can get it in avocado, extra virgin olive oil, or MCT coconut oil. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, and by doing this regularly, you're soaking up free radicals. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. One molecule is 1,000 times stronger. Now, take the C60 every day, preferably on an empty stomach in the morning, and this is going to soak up free radicals. You also notice that when you work out, you're going to recover quicker, because when you're working out, you're creating free radicals, and if you keep the inflammation down and soak up those free radicals, your tissues heal faster after a workout. When you're soaking up the free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing the concentration of oxidized LDL, so you're reducing plaque formation. That's really important. At the brain level, your neurons will be healthier. You're bringing down inflammation. You're bringing down stress in the neuron. You're improving the health of the mitochondria. It's going to have more ATP, and you're going to be able to produce more neurotransmitters, and over time, you'll have positive neuroplasticity. So you'll be thinking faster and have better memory. Your immune system and your endocrine system will perform better because you're soaking up those free radicals and keeping the inflammation down. And at the basal layer for your skin, new skin cells will improve. C60 stacks really well with resveratrol, especially for the skin. So if you want to slow down the aging process, take a teaspoon of this every day. Again, you can get it in MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, and extra virgin olive oil. It's something that I've been doing as part of my anti-aging protocol for over 10 years, every day. Teaspoon a day. It's that simple. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. So now we're going to play from MS Now about looks like the MoU deadline is expiring, but the United States and Iran seems to be agreeing to an extension.
Now, let's get smarter with the help of our lead-off panel. MS Now, senior White House correspondent, my dear friend Vaughn Hilliard is here. Susan Glasser, staff writer for The New Yorker, and Joshua Burns, my former colleague, now Politico Playbook chief correspondent and White House bureau chief. Mr. Hilliard, we turn to you first. A 60th day deadline for a broad peace deal always seemed like it was a tall task, but you have to say the White House had to think they were going to be in a way better place today than they are right now.
Right. Remember what was supposed to happen at the 60-day mark, right? That is where the conversation about what nuclear enrichment capacities Iran was going to be able to have going into the future was going to be determined. We're so far from that. We're not even at step one about opening up the Strait of Hormuz, let alone any negotiations about the nuclear enrichment capacities of Iran. And so that is where you go to these lists of demands that Iran has made very clear, that the U.S. and Israel must remove troops from Lebanon, for instance, must end its engagement with its proxies in other countries, that it must release the frozen assets to Iran. And the terms of this memorandum of understanding are just such in a difficult place for this administration that even the administration is debating over what the agenda and what the goal of the Iran war here is moving forward. And I think that is why you find the Trump administration in such a predicament at this point, because there has been no indication that Iran is willing to give at all in terms of what they want out of these negotiations, and that they are willing to play the long game. And in turn, people like Stephen Miller have even said that they're willing to go on. And Donald Trump has said to Americans that this is a form of patriotism, high gas prices, that it'll be worth it in the end. So we find ourselves in this stalemate here at the 60-day mark.
To go on how long? One might say forever. A forever war is the last thing Trump said he would get himself into. Joshua, can you explain what do we know about these supposedly unprecedented economic pressures the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he's going to impose on Iran? Iran is not a trading partner with us. What exactly can we do?
Joseph, we don't know details precisely to your point, but Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is becoming even more of a key player in this now than perhaps Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, because the president does not want to restart kinetic action here. And most people in his circles at this point don't want to restart kinetic action unless they go all the way, as folks say, to finish the job. And at this point, given our munitions, given what we've already seen with the USS Lincoln, even that is becoming less and less of a real possibility. And so now you have the economic fury operation, as folks in Treasury have been calling it, and Scott Bessent as that key player. But as you said, they have not laid out what they can clearly do there either. And every single day that this war goes on, Steph, it gets worse for this administration, between munitions stockpiles, between the mental health and physical health of the military, and of course, the midterms. Every single day we inch closer to that, and every single Republican operative I talk to, Steph, is absolutely tearing their hair out about this. I was on the road with Speaker Mike Johnson in Arizona a few weeks ago, and he was touting all of the achievements that the Republican Congress has done, mostly the big beautiful bill that, of course,
You could debate how effective that has been. But the big looming thing, the war with Iran that has raised gas prices, raised fertilizer prices, and made Americans extremely concerned, that part was really difficult for him to talk about, as it is for every Republican candidate in a vulnerable district, because all they can say is basically the message that the president himself delivered, which is, yeah, suck it up with the high gas prices because we're dealing with this power. A lot of voters aren't buying it.
This is Tosh, one of 86,000 Texans who work at Amazon. He started after his Air Force service. Hung up the uniform, put on the vest. This.
Buying it.
All right, Susan, let's talk about this MoU, because the Wall Street Journal has got this new reporting that said after the MoU was signed 60 days ago, Iran's hardline leaders met to actually escalate the war, ramping up their weapons production and potentially launching new attacks. What does that say about how the U.S. has approached this, and even how they've communicated with the American people about where things have stood?
Yeah, Steph, I think this is a really important point. First of all, there was an incredible amount of credulousness on the part of many with this memorandum of understanding. I can't think of a single serious expert on the Middle East who thought that it was a viable path toward a long-term peace deal. It collapsed of its own weight, even arguably sooner than many people expected. And yet, you had a lot of people amplifying the idea that the administration was putting out that this is some kind of historic, sweeping, massive peace deal, when in fact it was a very unrealistic program that really spoke to the increasing desperation of President Trump and his advisors to find a way out of a conflict they started without a clear plan that backfired in some serious way on them. I think right now what you're looking at is the extent to which this could become a much bigger strategic blow to the United States in the region. You mentioned the prospect of more widespread conflict. Clearly, President Trump was stunned when Iran chose the path already of escalation and going to attack U.S. interests in Jordan, for example. One thing we don't talk about a lot right now that's important is the extent to which American bases that we spend billions of dollars on in the Middle East. It's not just a question of the aircraft carriers. It's the bases are now functionally inoperable, not to mention unraveling relations with many of our allies in the Gulf across the region. They are unhappy about the conflict. They are unhappy about the blows to their economic, but also their security interests. And so what you have is Iran looking at a situation where they might find further advantage by continuing the conflict and opening up an even bigger gap between the United States and its allies in the Gulf. And I think that speaks to the extent to which it's absolute fantasy to have some of these discussions that the White House is claiming it's having about peace negotiations, which aren't happening. Economic sanctions, which they can't even outline what those would be. And so I think it's important to look at what's happening in the region. It's a big blow to U.S. interests, not only in the Middle East, but potentially around the world.
Okay, it's absolutely fair to be concerned about more widespread conflict. Just this morning, Susan, Donald Trump told Fox News that if Oman, I want to make sure, if Oman, quote, gets in the way, he says, we'll bomb the you-know-what out of them. What in the world are we talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, Steph, I wouldn't hold your breath that Donald Trump is going to widen the war himself by going to bomb the nation of Oman. But it speaks to a man who is cornered. Donald Trump loves to portray himself as this unconstrained, unfettered, most powerful man in the world, and yet it's very clear that he's backed himself into a corner right now. If anything, I would say what you're seeing is the fraying of the coalition that started the war. He's on bad terms right now with Israel in ways that we can talk about. He's on increasingly worsening terms with his allies across the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, which is very vulnerable right now. So the idea that he's going to start to threaten war against Oman, which had played a mediating role in this conflict, again, speaks to an American politician who sees himself in a corner and doesn't have a viable way out of it.
It's absolutely insane as well, Susan, that we're saying, well, maybe we shouldn't take the president that seriously, or don't take him at his word when he's telling a major news outlet that he may bomb the you-know-what out of another country. The fact that we've gotten to a place where we're like, oh, he's probably not serious. This is the president of the United States. Now I want to talk about these sailors, though, Dasha, because the U.S. is rushing to ship to replace the USS Lincoln and sending a top commander to visit the carrier to make this statement. Is it fair to say they're just trying to do some damage control? I mean, these sailors are suffering.
I mean, this requires so much more than just damage control. This story speaks volumes about exactly what Susan just mentioned, the way that the United States has been backed into a corner to where we have had these sailors deployed for so much longer with so many fewer resources than is typically required. I have had a number of sources across the military reach out and say, we are in a bad spot. We are sounding the alarms internally, but to be frank, they are not being heard. And it took a story. Do you think that if these headlines, if this fantastic reporting hadn't been put out there, that Bradley Cooper would be visiting the USS Lincoln, that this swap with the USS Washington would be happening right now? I highly doubt it, because it takes this being brought to the public attention in order for action to be taken here, because right now the administration is just trying to find its way out of this hole and doing that regardless of the human toll here.
All right, we're going to switch over to Fox Business, talking about how China is capable of setting the next Great War. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Zeolite. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue, drink the filtered water, and this will bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. This is a great way to detoxify your body, and that will help with your immune system and your endocrine system and your other organ systems. Another great way to detoxify your body is to take the Gladiator barley or the heirloom barley. Each one of these containers are about a month's supply. Now, the Gladiator barley will help with musculature, detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. The Gladiator barley does what it does is it brings down inflammation, soaks up free radicals, and detoxifies. It doesn't help with musculature. So if you want to do all that and build muscle, take the Gladiator barley. And Gladiator barley also stacks really well with the Mitotrol. Now, by taking the heirloom barley or the Gladiator barley, you're bringing down inflammation and soaking up free radicals. That's going to help with your cardiovascular system, your endocrine system, your immune system. It's going to help you to recover after a workout. It'll help with joint health and brain function. By bringing down inflammation and soaking up those free radicals, you're slowing down the aging process and allowing your tissues to heal. That's really important. So taking heirloom barley or Gladiator barley is a great way to get healthy. And if you want a little bit stronger detox, take the Zeolite. Now this Zeolite you can take every day. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take the supplements that I take on a regular basis to help slow down the aging process. It works. You'll have more vitality, more energy, more longevity. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
This. President Trump says he has instructed War Secretary Pete Hegseth to substantially reduce joint military exercises with South Korea, saying they're costly, and that Seoul is sending the wrong message to North Korea. Joining me now, Gatestone Institute senior fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, the president criticized South Korea for declining to join U.S. war efforts to denuclearize Iran. I want to get your thoughts on all of this, because the president, again, is on Truth Social this morning talking about the fact that a non-nuclear Iran is how this has to go. There is no other pathway forward. Talk about the connection, though, to South Korea.
Good morning, Cheryl. Lee Jae-myung, the president of South Korea, is a leftist. He's moving very fast into the pro-China, pro-North Korea camps. He abhors the United States, may even hate us. We know this from his statements. But this is a separate issue with regard to the joint military exercises with South Korea. I don't think there's a justification for reducing the scale of these exercises. And the reason is last week we learned that North Korean soldiers crossed the military demarcation line. In other words, they intruded into South Korea. And we've also seen these other incidents in the demilitarized zone. So at this point, we should be scaling up those exercises to create deterrence. We do not need one more miscalculation in North Asia.
Well, but we've only got 11 aircraft carriers, Gordon. I mean, I think it comes down to assets, and at this point, especially with the controversy around the USS Lincoln, the president has to look at the bigger picture. And also too, I mean, when it comes to China, I mean, this is where Iran and China, that connection and that link continues, unfortunately, to grow. Not reduce. The U.S. moving its final aircraft carrier in the Western Pacific to the Middle East, leaving that region without a U.S. carrier. But there's growing fears that, look, China could use that gap to project power, test American deterrence. Beijing is stepping up military activity. But Gordon, how much of an opening does that give China? In particular, I swing this back to the Middle East with you, because the president knows, and Xi Jinping is still scheduled to come to this country next month. The president knows that the Chinese are dependent on the energy story out of Iran, and they want peace. They don't want an escalation. That is my opinion. Please give me yours.
Yeah, this is a really interesting situation because there's so many moving parts, Cheryl. Yes, the George Washington, our carrier, is leaving East Asia for the Middle East. That does create a very large opening for China. But fortunately, Xi Jinping does not trust his generals and admirals, and I don't think he trusts his military either. So I don't believe that he would purposely launch hostilities. But the problem here is that we have seen some very provocative Chinese activity, especially in the waters east of Taiwan, as well as at Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. And one of those incidents could easily spiral out of control. China is perfectly capable of starting history's next great war with a blunder, because I don't think Xi Jinping can back down, given what's going on in China right now, especially with the declining economy and all the knives out for him. So there's just so many things moving in the wrong direction right now. And then, of course, there's China and Iran, as you mentioned. That's not a good story either for the United States, because Xi Jinping sees that we're not stopping China from fortifying Iran in the middle of a war and helping Iran kill Americans.
Yeah, well, I think that's why this meeting between Xi Jinping and President Trump is going to be so crucial next month, because China needs to decide, do you want to keep funding Iranian terror, or do you want to be part of the global stage? And that's partially AI. Liz Peek's got a question for you. Liz, jump in here.
Good morning, Gordon. The Financial Times this morning is reporting further slowdowns in the Chinese economy. Investment is down, retail sales are weak, etc. And they're claiming this is going to put pressure on Xi Jinping, something we keep hearing over and over again. But the question is, does he then resort to more fiscal stimulus, which they really can't afford? Or is it better play for him to continue these military provocations? I mean, it seems to me that's a great way to divert the population away from a sour economy and develop all the kind of nationalistic backing that he's accustomed to.
Yes, the Chinese people right now don't want war, and I don't think Xi Jinping can rally them, because we're seeing a disintegration in Chinese society. But I think you're absolutely right that in Xi Jinping's mind, he believes that hostilities and tension are good for him, because that would prevent other senior Communist Party figures from challenging or maybe even deposing him. So really right now, you've got a situation where Xi Jinping, I believe, he thinks it's in his interest to keep the pot boiling. Right now, we are seeing so many bad things. And you look at the Chinese economy, the numbers that came out a few hours ago were stunningly bad. I mean, you saw urban fixed asset investment for the first 7 months of this year down 6.7%. All of the indicators missed already low estimates. This is a Chinese economy that is probably contracting right now. And Xi Jinping is getting the blame for it because it's his policies that have been accelerating this downward trend. So this is an extremely volatile situation, and anything can go wrong.
Absolutely. Before you go, China reportedly is opening a regular shipping route, and it goes through the Arctic to Europe. So this cuts the journey down to about 20 days, half the time that some traditional routes take. Gordon, I want to get your thoughts, because what we've seen, and this pivots back to President Trump in the beginning of his term talking about Greenland. Just to point back to that real quick here, but this is another shipping route, but this it would be a strength. This would help China, but this would also get them away from the Strait of Hormuz. It would open up the supply chain, maybe not so much for the U.S., but it would open up the supply chain for China. Would that help them in that bad economy you were just talking about with Liz?
It certainly would, because it cuts the shipping in half between East Asia and Europe, and that means you get 20-day shipping rather than 40, and that reduces the cost of Chinese goods. But the Northern Sea Route, which is what China is using, is open only during the summer and only really between August and October. By the way, one of the great things about this, Cheryl, is that the world now has a new choke point. And the United States sits on half of that choke point, the Bering Sea, because these Chinese ships, in order to get to the Arctic, have to pass by Alaska. And that gives us even more leverage over world shipping. But right now, the Chinese think that they can basically change shipping patterns, but they're just dependent on Arctic ice conditions, which can change even during the summer.
But with these new ships and these new technologies, what's interesting is you're seeing, whether it's military ships or cargo ships, you're saying that it's now they're able to better navigate those Arctic waters. And that is something that we probably don't talk about enough, especially when it comes to supply chains and, of course, military incursions. Gordon Chang, it's always great to have you on the program. Thank you so much for joining us this Monday.
Thanks, Cheryl.
All right, we're going to go to a clip about CENTCOM commander meeting the sailors on the USS Abraham Lincoln. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the ashwagandha root. Ashwagandha root will help to control your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. Lignans soaks up free radicals, helps to improve your immune system and your endocrine system. It also brings down inflammation. And turmeric brings down inflammation and soaks up free radicals. You can take these separately. They're great supplements, but the magic here is the synergistic effects. Take the turmeric, the ashwagandha, and the lignans together. And what this will do is help to supercharge your anti-aging protocol. What this is going to do is it's going to soak up those free radicals in different ways. It's going to bring down the inflammation in different ways. And by doing that, you're going to improve your immune system, your endocrine system, brain function, and cardiovascular system. Now, when you do that on a regular basis, you're going to start seeing all these different organ systems are starting to slow down its age progression and give the tissues time to heal. And when you do that, you're going to go, wow, I got more energy, my immune system's better, my endocrine system's better, I have more vitality. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. These are supplements that I take regularly to help slow down the aging process. And my protocol is really simple. Probiotic is a foundation. The first pillar is the Max 35 or cleanse to boost up your innate immune system. The second pillar is C60 to soak up free radicals. The third pillar is the turmeric, ashwagandha, and the lignans. They're synergistic to help with the immune system and the endocrine system, cardiovascular system, and help with brain function, and Boomer Boost, which also helps with those organ systems and revs up your metabolism, and you have a steady burn of energy. When you do this, you'll start noticing you're targeting all the problems of aging. You're improving your immune system. You're bringing down inflammation. You're helping the cardiovascular system. You're revving up your metabolism. You are, with doing proper diet and exercise, you're building up muscle. You're helping with brain function. And when you do this on a regular basis, you're reducing the normal aging methylation of your genes, so you have a more youthful gene expression. You'll have a more youthful epigenetic profile compared to a peer group that's not doing that. So please take my advice, take the supplements that I offer. It works. It helps to slow down the aging process. So have more vitality, and you won't have to depend on a physician so much. And this is a great way at a societal level to reduce healthcare costs. If people are more healthy by taking the proper supplementation, by eating properly, exercising properly, having the proper lifestyle, we could shave off tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars in healthcare. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
The CBS News national security analyst Aaron McLean. Aaron, good morning to you this Monday. Let's start with the USS Abraham Lincoln. Does Admiral Cooper's visit really do enough to assuage all these concerns we've seen about the conditions there as the war remains unresolved?
Hey, good morning, Daryl. This is one of those situations where I think you have to be careful about drawing too many conclusions from anecdotal evidence about conditions on the ship, while at the same time recognizing that, look, 200 days at sea, a good chunk of which have been conducting combat operations, is a really, really long time. And so in a way, it's not surprising that morale would be low, and in certain respects, conditions would be demanding. Admiral Cooper had to get out there, it seems. The political furor over this issue was building and building, and it does look like Lincoln will be coming off station sometime soon. These guys give a lot for their country, and it's no doubt very difficult out on that ship.
And at the very least, reminds our viewers of the sacrifice soldiers make every single day to support the U.S. mission, but that mission has not succeeded yet. We've got the end now of this negotiation period with Iran, and we seem to be in the same place we were all those days ago. So where do you assess what's happening and what comes next? Is it President Trump following through?
A story that's been developing overnight.
Yeah,
President Trump's feeling that joint military
the 60-day period in which the nuclear deal was meant to be negotiated. Now, that seemed frankly fanciful at the moment that MoU was signed back in June, but it was still surprising, at least to me, how quickly the MoU fell apart. It was a matter of days and weeks. It didn't take months. That's because the MoU had baked into it some very ambiguous passages that the United States and Iran had never fundamentally agreed about the basics, particularly over the control of the Strait of Hormuz. And that's what you see right now. There's a battle for the Strait of Hormuz playing out every single day between the Trump administration and Iran. The nuclear issues are to be determined at some other point. Those are not on the table right now.
Now, we heard last week notes from Iran saying that they intend to keep the strait closed until the end of this term of the President Trump's presidency. What do you make of that? And what situation does it put the U.S. in as we talk about Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and advisor, jumping from a meeting with Hamas representatives in Egypt and onto Israel, which doesn't want to accept the deal? Where are we?
Sure, yeah. So I think this period that followed the signing of the MoU was a period where the president and others in Washington heaved a sigh of relief because they've been looking for a deal as a way out of this war that began at the end of February for some time. Meanwhile, the Iranian regime, which has hardened in its posture towards the United States, if that were possible, since February, took that period to prepare for what they see as future rounds of conflict. I think they're going to keep that strait closed for a very long time. Indeed, they see it as major leverage over the president. Meanwhile, Washington and the Navy, this is what the Lincoln is doing, are trying to stop Iranian shipping and getting friendly shipping out of the strait. So that's going to play out every day now for the indefinite future.
Yeah, and initially we were told this would take just a few weeks. Aaron McLean, great to have your analysis this Monday. Thanks for being with us.
Okay, we're going to go to CNN talking about military expert on Trump's South Korea decision. Unforced error. But before we do, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Max 35. It's 35 parts per million, or Cleanse, which is 30 parts per million. Either one will help to boost up your innate immune system. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and then swallow it. This will improve your oral cavity. It will neutralize because it has structural nanosilver. It'll help to improve your oral pharynx, maintain a mucosal barrier, improve the health of the epithelial cells, and by doing that, you're boosting up your innate immune system. This is perfect during the cold season. You should be doing this every day to neutralize and improve that oral cavity and that oral pharynx. I've been doing this protocol for over 6 years, every day, teaspoon a day, every day. And if you're exposed to a lot of dust because you're cleaning or you're working out in the yard, this will help to neutralize anything that you may contract. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, save some money. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. Purchase the great products that I offer and help support the channel.
We're following a story that's been developing overnight. President Trump scaling back joint military exercises with South Korea just hours before they were set to begin. So the president cited his relationship with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, saying the drills send a signal that is, quote, inappropriate and hostile. And he also called out Seoul's lack of assistance with Iran. He wrote, while somewhat unrelated, I recently asked the president of South Korea if they would like to join us in the denuclearization of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and they no thanks. So where does that leave our relationship with a crucial ally in the region?
This is really worrying a lot of countries about our reliability. It's very important. If you're going to have an alliance, you've got to have exercises to go with it.
One of the things he said in his Truth Social post was also, these exercises are not only costly, so they're expensive. Yeah. He claims much of the costs were paid for by the United States, as usual. Then when we were talking to military experts, they were like, actually, that's not how this works financially. Here's an example.
And this could have some serious impacts on our relationships in the Pacific realm. South Korea is a critical ally for us. And oh, by the way, they pay for a large portion of those exercises. They also pay for the upkeep of U.S. troops in South Korea. So the idea that we're paying for everything there is absolutely false. The other aspect of this is that the relationship that he has, that President Trump has with Kim Jong-un, is, I would characterize it as ephemeral at best. And to put your stock in a relationship like that and really limit exercises when, first of all, we've paid our portion of that already. The things that we do in those exercises are critical for the joint defense, not only of South Korea and Japan, but also for defense of the United States as well. And, this particular situation, what you're seeing is the North Koreans are getting an advantage at really an unforced error on our part. And it's going to damage the relationship that we have with the South Koreans, and that's not a good thing.
You know what's so interesting is actually...
Create PDF spaces in a click. Connect your dots, and then the dots.
You know what's so interesting is at Shangri-La earlier this year, Secretary Pete Hegseth said South Korea is doing a burden sharing in terms of taking on expensive costs when it comes to exercises. So, I don't think Donald Trump exactly knew what he was saying in this. I will say, just on the point of South Korea.
Well, he did. He was trying to make a point, though, right? Which is, yes, South Korea, you're not helping us out.
But it goes against what Pete Hegseth said, which is actually South Korea is one of our strongest allies and has been sharing the cost of a lot of these exercises. But what I will say about what's so concerning about this is the messaging it sends to allies. In the region right now, we have pulled out our Patriot battery to be rerouted to
right over those Patriots, yeah.
Exactly. We've pulled out a Marine unit to go to the war with Iran. And on top of that, now we're rerouting an aircraft carrier. The George Washington is going to backfill the Lincoln, which, as we
was there a world where we were running out of resources and couldn't do the exercise?
I think there is a concern over how much these exercises are meant to.
But you know what I mean? Like ships in Venezuela should be.
It's a cost to the force.
You were telling me something interesting during the break, which is that North Korea has learned information from its participation with Russia in that war with Ukraine. So what makes these exercises particularly important?
Well, these exercises, there is a history of these exercises. We have been doing exercises with South Korea for about 70 years, since 1955. This exercise, Old Chief Freedom Shield, was to test our defensive capabilities. These exercises are always defensive in nature. So it was to defend.
Here's what we would do if North Korea began.
That's right. And it's a simulation. And also we know that these soldiers that were sent from North Korea to Russia have learned critical information about drone warfare, which is the modern day battlefield, and electromagnetic warfare. So this was an exercise that was going to test all of this.
I don't know what it means exactly when Trump says we're going to have to scale it back. It started already. It's an 11-day exercise that's going to go on. But I think, are we surprised that he's making any overtures to, Kim Jong-un? No, but it is shocking.
Devil's advocate here. He's not just making overtures, right? He's saying, look, maybe doing these exercises are creating a hostile tone, and we want to not be hostile. We want to make sure North Korea doesn't push and take action. South Korea said they hope that the friendly relations between the leaders of North Korea and the U.S. would lead to meaningful talks between the two countries. Maybe I bring in Joel here. Are we going to see talks again?
Oh, yeah, right. We're not going to see talks that resolve anything. And no, I doubt we're going to see talks. It's a really strange dynamic, too, Audie, where, North Korea has been one very close ally of Iran for decades on end. And here we are now, essentially saying to South Korea, we're going to side with North Korea because we want you to oppose Iran. It's completely convoluted. It makes no sense. It undermines our alliances both in the Far East as well as in the Middle East.
Siemens Gage Holding is in the region. Joining me now, Gage, the U.S. and South Korea frequently hold these joint military drills involving thousands and thousands of troops. How is this announcement being received? What is it saying to South Korea?
They're right. They are frequent. Actually, they're so frequent, they have them every single year. At some point, trainings like this happen multiple times a year. And President Donald Trump is very familiar with this. Actually, during his first term in 2018 and 2019, both those years, he scaled back the operation. And the exercise, officially known as Ulchi Freedom Shield, is a joint exercise between the United States and South Korean forces. About 18,000 military members with the South Korean armed forces joined about 28,500 U.S. forces to train for all kinds of things. And this specific training this year was going to have some advanced modern warfare, things like GPS jamming, drones, things that we've seen in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Now, I will say this. The South Korean government says that the training, a 10-day training exercise, started this morning as scheduled. And they did release a statement where they said that, look, they're hoping that the relations between North Korea and the United States can help bring a period of peace for the entire Korean Peninsula. They also said, on the little bit of a jab, if you will, that President Donald Trump gave to the South Korean government, they said, look, we've been trying to help, in their words, trying to help with peace and ceasefire in Iran. They also want the Strait of Hormuz to open. But the South Korean government is a huge ally to the United States government. And obviously, North Korea, U.S. is pretty much the exact opposite. But this post on Truth Social from the president was actually kind of foreshadowed by a post that the president shared of just him and North Korean leaders saying, it was kind of a mean-mugging picture. But he said, look, our relationship is great. Now, what's really interesting here is that all of this is coming as President Donald Trump has tried, or at least appears to have tried, to set up some sort of meeting between Pyongyang and Washington, D.C. somewhere. Remember, over his first term in office, he met with Kim Jong-un 3 different times. So far in this term, they have not met once. But again, I don't know if this is an extension of maybe like an olive branch to the North Korean government to try to open up some sort of communication, maybe to get a win in the diplomacy area, especially with what's happening with Iran. But it also could be, on the other side, a message to the South Korean government that, hey, we're here to help protect you and keep you safe on the Korean Peninsula. And when we come to ask for help, we expect it off the Korean Peninsula. So there's kind of a lot of different takeaways here. As for the actual impact, I think that's something we're going to see over the coming days.
All right, let's talk more about this. Joining us right now is Gordon Sondland, the former U.S. ambassador to the European Union during Donald Trump's first term. It's good to see you, Ambassador. Thanks for jumping in. The way Tom Nichols wrote about this announcement from the president overnight in the commentary for The Atlantic, Nichols wrote this. Last winter, Donald Trump plunged recklessly into war with Iran. The United States is now losing that conflict. And so the president of the United States has taken the logical next step. He is punishing South Korea, a loyal American friend, and tempting U.S. enemies to doubt America's will to defend its allies. Do you see that?
No, I don't accept the premise of the Atlantic article. Look, what he's trying to do here is several things all at the same time. He's trying to keep very, very hostile regimes like North Korea at bay by at least continually extending olive branches, but not giving up a thing militarily. These exercises, which are held annually, were long planned. The North Koreans know that. He's trying to just insert some friendly rhetoric into the equation, and also to smack the South Koreans a little bit about their lack of willingness to stand next to us during the Iran conflict. They were not particularly helpful, although as time's gone by, they're slowly warming to the idea that this is in their interest to help. So no, I don't look at it as as extremely as the author in the Atlantic article wrote at all.
If the exercises are actually scaled back, do you think this hurts Ukraine? Are they the unwitting victim in this, considering that North Korea is the one helping Russia prolong the war on Ukraine?
No, I think the scaling back of the exercises is largely performative. I think they're going to do everything they need to do to have an effective exercise. I think this is Trump's strategy to keep an open line of communication with Kim Jong-un. And my sources tell me they are in regular contact. He won't admit that, and clearly the North Koreans won't admit that. But he believes very strongly in constant dialogue, and I think that's what's going on between the United States and North Korea right now.
All right, we're going to switch over to a clip about the bond market. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver toothpaste. This will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath. It's going to help to neutralize, because that's the structural nanosilver, it has no fluoride. It'll reduce inflammation at the gum line and help the health of the gum line. And with good oral hygiene, you're helping your cardiovascular system too. So please go to my store and get the structural nanosilver toothpaste. This toothpaste is the best toothpaste you're going to be able to get. So get a few tubes of this for your household, and it works really well, especially for the cold season, because it's neutralizing. So please go to my store and get the structural nanosilver toothpaste. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Writing, central banks can initiate rate hiking cycles to tame inflation, but underlying debt dynamics ultimately dictate how those cycles end. Stephen joins us now for more. Steve, my friend, it's good to hear from you. It's good to see you.
Hi, John.
Are we on the brink of some bond market pushback, limiting the ability to hike rates here at some of these central banks?
Well, the focus is Jackson Hole already. I know it's a week or so away, but people are now discussing what's going to come up at these meetings, because it's very often the case that big set-piece moves happen at these conferences. I think that you've reported the impact of debt and fiscal dynamics on bond yields and earnings. And I think that you're quite right. It's a bit more complicated than just the debt levels or the fiscal position, because when earnings are so strong, then the risk premium that goes onto the bond yields or the term premium has to be higher. I mean, try explaining to a young person why they should buy bonds when equities keep blowing the lights out every week. So it's quite simple. There's the risk premium, and I think the fiscal dynamics are somewhat worrying. I guess you could say there's an international effect as well on the long end of bond curves here in the JGBs at the moment. But a few weeks ago, it might have been gilts or bunds or Australia or something. So I think there's a whole list of factors that are explaining this drip higher in bond yields at the long end.
Steve, can I pick out one? And it's supply.
Yeah.
I remember a fantastic paper that you published a number of years ago. You know where I'm going with this. Bonds aren't potatoes.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about the importance, or maybe the insignificance of supply, traditionally, to DM sovereign debt markets?
The point of the paper was that the supply gets taken down. Bond yields reflect the policy rate and the expected path of that policy rate and where it ends up. So it should be that all available information is factored into the price. Where I think the the model has kind of broken down is with these huge shocks like COVID, where we had a big shift in the level of debt, maybe 20-25% level shift, like GFC in 2008. The thing about it is, John, if you look at the 2-year that you were covering just now, the 2-year is totally explained by the policy rate and where it's going to go next. Just in the space of the last 6 months or so, we've had a move from markets looking for 3 rate cuts to as many as 2 rate hikes in a year's time. So that's a net 5 rate hike move. And that explains the entirety, if not more, of the shift in those yields in the 2-year, even out to the 5-year. It's when you get to the 10-year plus that something else is clearly at work, and those yields don't want to go back below 5% at the moment. And I think there is a supply dynamic, but I think it's a bit cheap to say that there's too many bonds around, that's why the yields are going up. I think the explanation is a bit more sophisticated. I think it's related to the performance of stocks, what's happening in Japan, and yes, there is some fiscal risk premium.
Steve, can I add in maybe corporate as well, and the rising competition for capital that we are starting to see increasingly in the debt market too? What kind of influence is that having in a way that maybe it didn't in years gone by?
It's so right. It's so right, John. And in fact, thank you for reminding me of that. And in many ways, I include it in the risk premium category. I'm faced with the choice between a household name that's issuing long bonds that has a very good credit and the US Treasury, where some people are even questioning the credit. When you can get even more yield in that household name electronics company, whoever it might be, guess what's going to happen? So traditionally, you have a crowding out when yields get high enough and the government always gets done. So there shouldn't be a problem. But that crowding out now faces a challenge from other needers of capital. So there is this demand for capital to invest. I think that is part of it as well. So let's add that to the list, John.
Steve, given the reality we're in right now, where does this leave the Treasury Department in terms of their options and where are they going to sell debt?
Yeah, well, at the moment, Anne-Marie, they've got enough data to be comfortable. So we're looking at the covers and the tails and the indirect bids, etc. But we might be getting a bit twitchy further out on the curve. So the 30-year bonds may not be so much in demand, even when the yield is so fantastically high. So that says cut back the supply of the long-dated paper and increase the supply of the shorter-dated. Now, of course, they're already doing that, and you can't keep doing this forever. So it seems to me that the US Treasury is not doing the US taxpayer any favors by issuing long bonds north of 5% yield. They're doing a great favor to the savers who are able to lock in those yields, but they're not really doing anyone who's paying tax a real favor there. So I think reducing the quantity at the longer end makes sense. I think also there needs to be a bit more fiscal rigor. There needs to be a plan. Because at the moment, it just seems to me there's no accountability. And you'll see that countries like Germany and to some extent Australia, Switzerland, well, they've had debt breaks. And even in the UK, I think that there's at least a 5-year plan to try and balance the books somewhat. The US doesn't even seem to have that at the moment. So I think markets would appreciate a guidance on the fiscal outlook.
There's a risk, of course, Anne-Marie, that this bond market forces that guidance, forces that call for action.
Exactly. And we've actually seen this bond market force the president reverse policy. So but when it comes to tariffs last year, so potentially you could see it again. Twitchy.
This is Paytime Solutions.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver gel. You can get it in the tube form or the quick dispenser form called Renew. It's dual purpose. You can use it as a daily skincare. You can help to heal the wound quicker. And you can use it during the cold season and the allergy season. Put it on your hands, lightly coat your nostrils. It stays active for 5.5 hours. So please go to my store and get the structural nano silver gel. Have some at home, have some at work. You never know when you need it. Go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
stocks that are, I guess, generating excitement right now. I think I'm reading that Berkshire has taken another huge chunk of Alphabet.
Yeah, that's right. So Berkshire Hathaway, they added roughly another $8 billion in Alphabet.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot of Alphabet.
And that's on top of the $10 billion private placements they committed and disclosed before. And remember, Alphabet was a position initially started by Warren Buffett 2025, a year ago. Now it is run under Greg Bell, but apparently the company is still pretty committed to this cabinet.
You know what I noticed over the last several years, I guess, is that, particularly looking at these 13Fs, is just more and more family offices are showing up here. I mean, family offices, they're becoming serious players out there in the investment world. What do you guys see from your report?
Yeah, that's a good observation. I would agree with that trend. And I would say, yeah, overall, because CENTCOM has the requirements is any investment funds, I believe, was more than 100 million or 200 million AUMs. That's the threshold you need to report. So that's why we're seeing them in the quarterly filings. But otherwise, yeah, they've been very active. It just, you don't, they also being super under the radar for the most part with their investments. Yeah.
I think that's changing though, because they're getting so big, these family offices, that they are showing up in some of these public filings.
Oh, is this just like a more private wealth coming, or why is there such a boom of private offices?
I think it's just because so much, the economy's been so good for so long, coming out of the great financial crisis. There's been a lot of private wealth created, that gets monetized. You stick it in the stock market, that goes up double digits every year. There's just more wealthy people out there. And this family office structure, as opposed to just giving it to my broker, Merrill Lynch, I'm going to create a family office to do all this stuff, taxes, all that kind of stuff. So it's been an interesting play. Yi-Chin, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Yi-Chin Shin, equities reporter for Bloomberg News. It's 13F filing season. Again, always a fun time to go see who's buying what, who's selling what. And again, outbound asset, I think that is like a really high quality, high growth hedge fund buying Macy's.
You're just in shock over Macy's. I'm excited because that's a company that I know and understand.
But what you're supposed to do in hedge funds is find the stuff that nobody knows. And find the one that's where you're going to generate the alpha. You don't just go and buy Apple. I've got Apple in my 401k. Give me a name that I don't know, or give me a strategy, or give me a trade that maybe is kind of out of the market focus, and that's going to generate that alpha for me. So that's kind of what I was told back in my hedge fund. So looking at the markets here, S&P pretty much unchanged on the day. The Dow's off 180, and the Nasdaq's up 47. So not a lot of direction out there. Tom from the Upper East Side looking for a VIX quote just under 14.95, which means equity markets are fairly benign right now as it relates to volatility. So that's kind of how we broadly define.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the super strong relief. This will help with bruises, sprains, pulled muscles, tension headaches, arthritis. It's a topical. You rub it in the area that you have the pain, and it eliminates the pain or reduces it within 90 seconds. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the super strong relief. This is perfect for arthritis. And get the vitamin D3. This is dual purpose. It's a gene expression cofactor, so your cells perform properly. It helps to boost up the immune system by forcing cells to go into apoptosis if they're infected. And vitamin D3 helps with the cardiovascular system, especially if you stack it with K2, MK7, and do some resistance training, taking calcium, take the vitamin D3, and you're going to be building denser bone. And vitamin D3 is more effective when you take it with magnesium. So make sure you get the magnesium and zinc and the vitamin C and magnesium to help to improve the efficacy of vitamin D3. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Now let's go over the markets a little bit. The oil market is trading at 82.66, so it's still in that trading range of 79.62 to about 88. but on the lower bound of that range. The S&P 500 is trading at 7,798. And the short ETF for semiconductors is going down. It's now trading at 1096. I think that will test the $10 a share mark because right now there is a rally going on in tech, and it's probably going to have sustainability for a few weeks.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 11:21 on Wall Street. I'm Amy Morris. This Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Golden Crest Metals. Inflation, tariffs, and volatility have some investors turning to gold for stability. To get a free gold and silver info guide and learn how to add metals to your IRA or 401k tax and penalty free, go to goldencrestmetals.com/guide. That's goldencrestmetals.com/guide. Equinor strengthening its position in the U.S. power market. It's agreed to acquire an interest in the Lackawanna Energy Center in Pennsylvania. Under that agreement, Equinor will acquire more than 87.7% of Lackawanna for $940 million. Equinor shares are less than 1% higher. Investment firms for ultra-wealthy individuals have built up billions of dollars of exposure to SpaceX, highlighting their ability to muscle in on sought-after business opportunities. More than a dozen family offices held a total of at least $3.8 billion in SpaceX through the first half of this year. SpaceX shares right now not quite 6% higher. President Trump reportedly says he's in no hurry to end the war with Iran, which has subdued some markets. We do check those markets for you all day long here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 now little changed on the downside. NASDAQ is up about 0.2%. The Dow down about 0.3%. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.7% and the 2-year yield at 4.16%. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is down about 0.1%. Crude oil moving higher now. Whoa, okay, it's moving up higher, but let's say it's clawing back some of those losses from earlier today. WTI now topping $83 a barrel, and Brent crude near $89 a barrel. It's about 0.3% higher. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Stacey.
All right, Amy Morris, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Amy Morris down in Washington, D.C. It is Stacey Bennett Smith, Paul Sweeney. We're in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. Here's one of the most read stories on the Bloomberg terminal. Americans are showing signs that they have reached their limit with surging beef prices, with beef sales volumes falling 0.3% in the 13 weeks ending mid-July. Of course, the solution here in my mind, make more cows. Elena Peng joins us here. She's the agriculture reporter for Bloomberg News. Apparently, Elena, it's not that easy, is it, to get beef supply up and prices down?
Yeah, so the U.S. cattle herd runs very cyclically. It runs on a decade-ish long cycle, and right now we're sort of at the base of one of those cycles where the U.S. cattle herd is really small, and ranchers a couple years ago basically started selling more of their animals for meat because the production costs were really high in terms of like interest rates, and then the drought was also severe at that point. And a lot of animals in the early stages of their lives are grazing. So if there's not enough grass and farmers have to put in a lot of money for hay and other feed, then it doesn't make a lot of sense to hold on to those animals for a really long time. And we're still kind of in that boat. We're starting to see some like more modest signs of rebuild, but not nearly enough. And so that's kept the US beef supply pretty much under pressure for much of the last couple of years.
Here's the number, just out of, since maybe like the recent lows, 2010 to recently, ground beef up over 200% during that time. Unbelievable.
This is unbelievable. I mean, Paul's absolutely right. Make more cows. These are like the beautiful laws of supply and demand. When, you know, the price gets really high, more cattle producers will buy cows, and that there will be more beef and the price will drop. You mentioned that the input costs are just rising a lot. What are some of those costs, and how is it possible that they're outweighing these really high prices? Because, you know, these prices have been high for years now.
Yes, for sure. So obviously interest rates are like the main thing. The costs of land are really high for ranchers.
Interest rates affecting, like they borrow money for equipment,
borrow
land
for
for
equipment,
equipment.
for land, for feed. Feed prices have gone a little bit better, but you also have to consider, like, if you're a rancher that's thinking about retaining animals for breeding, you're trying to figure out what cattle prices are going to look like a year or two from now. So like right now, if you have an animal and you sell it, you're getting a good amount of money back. But if you hold onto that animal for breeding in like a year, they don't really know what the prices will look like. So you take that in conjunction with drought, in conjunction with high interest rates and all of these other factors. And like some ranchers are still seeing selling as the way to go. We're starting to see that cycle turn a little bit. I think the latest USDA data showed like a 3% bump in those animals that are supposed to be for breeding. So that's like signs of recovery for the cattle herd, but that like also takes time.
Again, I watched Dutton Ranch. I think I'm an expert on ranching.
100%.
So is there any incentive from the government? Does the government subsidize at all these ranchers and maybe could support them having bigger herds?
In Texas, they've been pushing for that. I know the Texas Agriculture Commissioner has pushed for like more financial support for cow-calf ranchers. Those are the ones that have the animals at the really like start of the supply chain. Those tend to be smaller producers, so I do think the financial backing would be helpful, but I think a lot of it is just like waiting for the supply demand balance to balance out. And I think we're starting to see that with supply starting to increase a little, and we're starting to see consumers hit that like price ceiling that they're willing to pay. And that's also cooling markets a little. So eventually that will also incentivize ranchers to start holding on to animals for better prices, hopefully later, instead of selling mostly everything now.
Yeah, I mean, let's go all the way up to the supply chain to our plates. So what has happened to beef prices, and what are we seeing from the beef eaters of the world?
Yes, beef prices have jumped really strongly, and I think for a long time, honestly, the beef industry itself was kind of surprised that people kept buying. Basically, what we saw was people, instead of buying steaks, were going home or buying ground beef instead.
We can substitute in pork or chicken or...
But apparently people don't, is the really interesting thing. Like chicken demand has been going up pretty steadily, and so the high beef prices have been definitely like a boost to that chicken demand. But then you look at pork, which is like ground pork, I think the last time I looked at the retail data, cheapest grounds available, but not that much substitution. I think people like what they like.
Inelastic demand for beef?
Yeah, somewhat inelastic. So I think like even now, like when we're talking about this data that includes like the very crucial July 4th period, it's 0.3% down, like it's flat. It's not demand destruction, which I think is really interesting. It's just also people saying, I'm not going to buy more at these prices.
Well, guess what I bought yesterday and slapped on the grill? New York strip, baby.
Nice.
Awesome. It was a beast.
You didn't consider chicken?
New York strip, only the finest. But no, my bellwether is the New York strip at Keen's Steakhouse. That is my bellwether for where beef prices are going. Every time I go in there, it's another $5. You know,
really? It just looked up and up?
That's how I go. That's my global barometer for beef prices. Eileen and Peng, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it there. Good story on the Bloomberg terminal. Let's get back to these markets. S&P down 7 points, the Dow minus 170, and the Nasdaq's up 50 points there. Brighteon Pence joins us here in studio. He's the Chief Investment Officer of Pence Wealth Management. Brighteon, what's the conversation you're having with your clients these days? Because we've got higher stock prices, but boy, we've got significantly higher yields out there in the bond market as well.
Well, generally, most of our clients are focused on the equity side of it, and you know, the big conversation that you have is we're in this environment where the E is growing faster than the P. If you look at PE ratios, right? So if earnings are at an all-time high, then it makes sense for the market to be at an all-time high. And so people who are like, oh my gosh, it's at an all-time high, and we're worried, like, well, yeah, but it's fundamentally sound. It's not a bubble. It's if earnings are doing as well as they are, then the market's going to do as well as they are. Now, the competition to that, as you brought up, is we see this uptick in interest rates, and we see this uptrend in the yields that people are getting. But I think that it hasn't reached that moment to where there's a big switch. Now, you get a 10-year at 5, yielding 5% or something like that. I think you're going to begin to see some major movement in there. We're close. I mean, but I just, you know, that's kind of the bellwether number that I would look at. You get a little bit closer to 5, and then you're going to see some movement of equities back over into the fixed income side of it.
I mean, certainly the markets have been a superstar of our economy for the last few years. There are some signals that some of the fundamentals of the economy are possibly faltering, or at least in a situation of uncertainty, including the job market, including retail sales. Are there any of those that you're watching for signs that maybe this sort of rally will change course?
Well, I think we pay attention to the consumer a lot, and it's very true that consumers in certain segments of the economy are getting stretched. And we just had this conversation about beef prices, and so prices are up, certain things are up, but again, there is some inelastic demand, and people are kind of moving within what are they going to pick to spend their money on, but they're still spending money. So the general economy tends to look good. We have these pockets of price dislocation, and you do have some people getting stretched. There's probably more than has been in a while. So we're watching that very, very carefully, but I don't think it's one of these moments where yet that we've really pushed it to the point that you see demand destruction. Now, gas prices get up to $5. Now that's where you get demand destruction. We're about 4 right now. But as long as oil prices are in this 80s thing, you're all right. You kick it up above that, then we see some demand destruction, some real reallocation of money for people. But in general, it all looks pretty good.
One of the names on your list has been on my interest list, which is Microsoft. A month or so ago, I looked at my Bloomberg, and it's down 25% year to date. Are you kidding me? Is this one of these software stocks that got thrown out with the AI risk? And sure, they put up a great print and the stocks come back. Well, talk to us about your Microsoft.
Well, people sometimes throw the baby out with the bathwater. We really like Microsoft, and they're monetizing across 3 or 4 layers of this AI build out. They've really begun to get Azure working. It's got more than $100 billion in revenue. I mean, and they've got 20 to 22% of the global market share for AI. So I think they're strategically very well positioned. When you see, I've been saying for a long time, buy chips on dips, but also that you begin to take a look at how much Microsoft is embedded in here. And here's the thing. Now that they've been able to get this AI thing working, they've been able to get Copilot working, they've been able to get these things working, they are so embedded in everyone's daily life. As long as they begin to get it right, they don't have to get it perfect, they just have to get close. It's going to be the go-to for so many people. So we think it's got a very long runway here, and taking advantage of any price dislocation is probably a good idea.
Brad, remind me and our audience the pin on your lapel of your suit jacket.
Oh, that's a Bronze Star.
And where did you get the Bronze Star?
That was during Desert Storm. So I was there during the very first Gulf War. I think throughout all my adult life, we've been dealing with the Middle East, Gulf War, with Iran, with all of these things. So it's one of these things that continue to run. But yes, that's where it's from.
Thank you for your service.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your service.
Harvard undergrad, he went down the road and got his ROTC commission from the Army at MIT.
Yes.
There you go. And then the rest is history. Here he is.
And here we are.
Talking stocks, talking Microsoft with us. Brighteon Pence, Chief Investment Officer, Pence Capital. Thanks so much for joining us here in studio. Looking at the markets here.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. Collagen will help with your skin, your nails, your hair, your musculature, your cartilage for your joints, and your bones. So please go to my store and get the collagen. This is a month's supply. Mix it with soft foods like hummus or yogurt or applesauce. You can mix it with milk, put it in a smoothie, or mix it with just filtered water. But take it every day. It's really important. Some people even put it in coffee. And then do some resistance training, do some exercising, and that will help with your joints and help with your musculature, your bone density. Really important. But it's also very good for your skin. Take it with the vitamin C and magnesium supplement. Drink it with filtered water. And what will happen is the vitamin C and the collagen will cross-link and improve that dermal layer. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Let's take a look at some other clips here.
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform.
Oregon, Texas Congressman Pat Fallon, he's also on the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, your thoughts on your colleagues' call for congressional oversight and some of these reports that we've gotten from the Lincoln that potentially several crew members tried to jump?
Well, Cheryl, good morning, and thanks for having me on. We have oversight currently. I'm sitting on the Armed Services Committee with my friend Don Bacon, and these reports are just that. I haven't heard anything personally from our office, and I trust the Navy to do this as well. So I don't make much of it, to be honest.
Okay, so you're not concerned about these reports. 2 to 60 days is a long time, for deployment.
Yeah, oh no, there's no doubt about it. I mean, look at our armed services. Our folks, our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen do a fantastic job. Of course, when I served, you always prefer to be stateside if possible, but as part of the job is to deploy, and they did that. I think they did an outstanding job. I'm glad they're coming back.
Yeah, well, and they are, and certainly that changes the dynamics of what we're seeing over with South Korea and those military drills. But I want to move on to the work of the day here, because Congress, you're on August recess. The House returns August 31st. That gives you 4 legislative weeks on the calendar before leaving Washington again in October. That means there's 16 scheduled legislative days for the House to pass the remainder of the president's agenda before the midterms. This includes the Stop Government Funding Bill, Reconciliation 3.0, the Save America Act is still in limbo, although you can argue that's the Senate's problem, not your problem. But what if they can realistically get done now before these midterms because of this short window?
Sure, that's a great question. It's a fair one. First and foremost, we have to keep the government open, because the Democrats have proven time and again that they want to shut the government down so they can have an electoral talking point come the November midterms. They'll say, look at the Republicans, they can't govern, they have the House, Senate, White House, and yet they shut the government down, which is patently untrue and it's false. And I can prove it because the last government shutdown, finally we were open because some of the Democratic senators caved, because you need 60 votes in the Senate to fund this. So the way around it, as you mentioned, is Reconciliation 3.0. We would need any Democratic votes. I do think that's a top priority. We can get that done. We must get that done. Also passed an Iranian supplemental for the Iranian conflict. That's going to be between $70 and $90 billion. And I would love to see the Save America Act passed. But as my good friend, the soon-to-be next governor of Florida, Byron Donalds, said, the Senate sucks. And they really got to get on their horse and get that done.
Well, you mentioned this. Obviously, the ask from the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, for this $1.5 trillion ask. But then there's also the emergency, the quick money that he needs in the billions for the military, again, because of these ongoing operations in Iran. But at the same time, you and some of your, not necessarily you, but some of your colleagues have come on the program and said that we need to make sure that the money is well spent. That, again, is oversight. And I know that you've heard these concerns, in particular when you've got budget hawks that are very concerned about debt and deficits in this nation, which have continued to jump.
Oh yeah, the debts and deficit are out of line. I mean, it's I just did a town hall recently, and I said our number one national security concern really comes out of Beijing, and the number two comes out of Washington because of the spending. It's an existential threat to our future. There's no doubt about it. But unfortunately, Cheryl, we live in a dangerous world, and you talk about both Clintons, both Bushes, Obama, Biden, Harris, and President Trump all had something in common, whether they were candidates or actual served in the presidency. They all said we will not have a nuclear Iran, and Iran was danger close, and President Trump took action.
Yeah, he reiterated that this morning in a Truth Social post. Now, the State of America Act is still stalled in the Senate. Of course, there's limited time, which looks like it makes it unlikely to pass before then. The Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals reinstated multiple provisions of a 2021 Texas election integrity law. That created an ID requirement for mail-in ballots and applications. The lower court blocked those changes in March. Congressman, I want to get your thoughts on that, because overall, there are pieces of Save America Act that Americans overwhelmingly support. More than 80% of Americans say, yes, ID to vote, absolutely. How do you get at least a piece of the Save America Act through, in your opinion? Again, this is the Senate's ballgame right now, but it's been yours.
You hope that Chuck Schumer catches a strong case of common sense. I was in the Texas legislature for 8 years and part of that voter ID bill, and it's an excellent one. When you look at Americans, what do they think about the Save America Act / voter ID? Almost unanimity with the Republicans, 96%. Even independents are over 80%. Democrats, or at least the rank and file ones across the country, are 70% plus. Even voters under 30. So universally, Americans think this is common sense. You hope it can get done. And if it can't, I would love to see we attach it to Reconciliation 3.0, and then the Republican senators overrule the parliamentarian if it's stripped out.
All right. Well, I want to ask you about something else that's going on down in Texas right now. This is fascinating. So we're less than 80 days to the midterms. Voters in Texas casting their ballots for the first time since the Republican-led redistricting efforts that we saw. But this is a major test for Democrats in their sway with those Latino voters in particular. Politico reporting the party remains confident in their chances to win seats that may not be as red as they appear. And what they report in here, and this is from Politico, is that Representative Henry Cuellar approached Mike Johnson, this is Politico reporting this, and said, who should I think? You are the White House. Because his team crunched the numbers, they believe that this redistricting effort in the state is better for him. Your thoughts on that?
AI at Amazon is
extremely innovative. Everything is happening so fast.
You're surrounded by people from whom you can learn something new.
Amazon, based on the network you're building and your determination, you have every.
Your thoughts on that?
Henry Cuellar is a very unique Democrat. He votes with us a lot of the time on border security and such, and Henry is very popular in that district, so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there come November. The other Democrats, I doubt, are thanking Mike Johnson or anyone else in Washington. Texas is a red state, and it's because we believe in limited government, low taxes, reasonable regulation, people voting with their feet. That's why you see states like Tennessee, Florida, Texas growing, while states like California, New York, New Jersey, Illinois are bleeding jobs and opportunity to those very states I just mentioned. So I'm very confident we'll do well come November, and we will hold a lot of the Hispanic support that President Trump has swung over in the last 8 years.
Real quick before you go, later today, Energy Secretary Chris Wright is going to be appearing in Midland, Texas. He's going to be meeting with some executives from energy companies. We don't have the names yet, but I was looking at Diamondback and Exxon, Conoco that are in that area that operate. I want to get your take on this because, and August Luber, actually, your colleague, is going to be with him as well. And they're going to talk about gasoline prices, and they're going to talk about energy production. This is the Permian Basin. This is part of it. This is a big piece of that energy story, your state. How important is this to you, not just this event, but also the messaging that's going to come out of it?
That's very important. You know, I was asked in some local interviews I did last week about, does the price of the pump affect your chances to hold the House in the Senate come November? And of course it does. I mean, we're all feeling it, and I do hear that from constituents. And if unfortunately, if the Iraq conflict didn't happen, I don't think we'd have this issue, but it did. And it's the mullahs in Iran and Tehran that are responsible for it. So it's very important to make sure that American production is strong and vibrant and robust. And increase, quite frankly, because the greater supply we have out there as a little commodity, maybe the price will come down a bit.
All right, Congressman Pat Balance, always great to speak with you, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Cheryl. God bless. Take care.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. Collagen can be stacked with the collagen to help to remodel the joint. You can take them separately, but I recommend you take them together. You can also stack this with the super strong relief to reduce the pain if you're remodeling your joint, especially for sports injury or for arthritis. They'll help to reduce the pain. Now, what you should be doing is just opening up the joint up to a point of pain, and then a little bit more, count to about 30 seconds, relax, and then do that again. Do that 3 times. Now, do that every day, and over time, you're going to be able to open up the joint farther without pain. Now, collagen is going to help to remodel that joint. It's going to help to remodel the cartilage and the cushioning of the joint, block the pain gatekeeper NAV 1.7, reduce joint erosion by blocking MMP3 and MMP13, and block the inflammation of the joint by blocking EP4. So take this every day and do these exercises, and over time you're going to notice that your arthritis or your sports injury with that joint is healing. You're remodeling that joint, but it takes time. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. That's the end of my broadcast. Thank you for listening. Please share the links, ask your social media to follow me, and get the great products that I offer. These are products that I take regularly that help to slow down the aging process. It works, they're very high quality, and you can save some money by using discount 5. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.